All right. Well, good morning, good afternoon, everyone. My name is William Davis, and I'm the Director of Education for Wilson Daniels. Thanks for everybody joining in. We are waiting for our friend Grégory Viennois to join us from Domaine Laroche. He is the technical director. Sorry, say that 3 times fast and see if that works out. The technical director for Domaine Laroche and for the Advini group. So I'm really excited to be able to spend some time with Grégory as he explains some of the history as well as the building, the Obédiencerie, in the village of Chablis. So I am waiting for him to join on. Thanks for everybody clocking in. Good to see everybody as they join. So this is the front of the Obédiencerie, which Michel Laroche purchased in 1985. So of course, you know, Laroche has one of the largest holdings of both Premier and Grand Cru vineyards in the entire region. So I am really looking forward to spending some time with Grégory. So I think that there might give us just a minute here. I think that he is about to clock on, and once he does, we will go live with him in France. So if you do happen to have any questions, feel free to comment. We will do whatever we can to get those answered from Grégory. He's a wealth of information, not only a phenomenal winemaker, but he's got a great understanding of the vines as an agronomist, as well as being a winemaker. So we're starting to fill up here very quickly. So this is actually where we're going to start, inside the courtyard of the Obédiencerie. Hey, greetings from Newport, Rhode Island. Good to see you. Thanks for joining us. It's a good way to have a little Chablis with lunch, I suppose, as it's 12:02. What's going on, Mike? Good to see you as well, my man. You know, we're going to give him a minute. Unfortunately, due to the Wi-Fi and the challenges there, we aren't going to be able to go into the cellars per se. That's always a difficulty there. And I think we just saw Laroche pop up. Let's see if I can get him to... There we go. Again, thanks for everybody for joining. I've got a little bit of Chablis in glass, and hopefully Grégory is going to enable us to walk through that. Grégory, how are you, my friend? Okay,
Hello.
Let's see if we're actually going to turn you sideways, Greg. It needs to be upright. The camera needs
like
to be
this.
up. There you go. Perfect. Yeah. The joys of split screen with Instagram is that, you know, you're better off than having your phone upright.
Yeah, like this.
Yep. Perfect. Wow. Excellent. So I was saying that the weather seemed to be beautiful on our dry run a few minutes ago. So tell us how things are going on in terms of flowering and, you know, the start to the season, the growing season.
So the growing season is going very well. It was a little bit touchy with the frost, but it's okay. We didn't have any damages. What we can say that we have the flowering will start probably end of this week or beginning of next. It could be a precoce vintage, but now we have a little delay that's the previous forecast because of the cold temperatures we had last week. It's a good thing. We had between 40 and 60 millimeters of rainfall last week. It's very good. Yeah. Because, you know, the reserves were very low. We didn't have a lot of rain during the last fall, the last winter. So it's very good. Now the growth is very good, and so it's a little bit early. You know, many things can arrive, but today it's very good. We didn't have any disease. We didn't have any disease pressure also, so it works well. So we cross the finger and we'll see, but it could be a good vintage, perhaps. We can expect to start the harvest beginning of September. We'll see.
Oh,
Too
great.
early.
Well, I'm keeping my fingers crossed for you as
Thank
well.
you.
Because, I think that, 2018, 2019, those vintages, they seem to do fairly well for many growers in France,
Yeah.
correct?
Yeah, I think we have some different cycles. 16 was very difficult in terms of rainfall. It was the flowering was very hard because it was cold, it was rainy and windy. So 18 and 90 were two very great vintages. Perhaps a little different with the flowering. It was most difficult for 19. It was a crop, the total crop of 19 were a little bit low.
So more of that, more of uneven flowering, a little bit more of a hen and chicken, so you had much lower crops. So I was talking about the challenges with flowering in 2019, but 18 was healthy.
Yeah, 18 was a perfect vintage. It was, there is always an answer of the vines. After two vintages with very low crop, 18 was the vintage to have a good one. We had in the winter 17 and 18 we had a lot of rainfall, so it was very good for the reserve. So it's why 18 was so nice.
Well, great. So tell us a little bit about the history of Domaine Laroche, from its inception up until you joined in 2011.
So here we are here in the garden of Domaine Laroche. It's the headquarter of the estate. We are it's the birthplace of Domaine Laroche. We are in the center of the village of Chablis. Perhaps I can take my phone and so you can follow me just to understand where we are. And I think it's very easy after to understand how our roots. Please. So you can imagine we are here. We are just a few meters from La Rivière Le Serein, and just the building after this on your right is the church of Saint-Martin. And here it was during the Middle Age. It was the monk's house. It's where at this time the monks prayed and synced. It was very important. So you can see we have very old cellars. Perhaps you can see it. Yeah, it's okay. With the network, it's
that's
okay.
Great.
So this one, and in the right, you will see it's a cellar of Saint-Martin. Because there is a very...
So that is the cellar where the relics were held. Is that correct?
Yeah, exactly. Because there is a very important link between Domaine Laroche and Saint-Martin. You can imagine that in the 9th century, the monks of Saint-Martin de Tours have hidden the relics of Saint-Martin here in l'Obédiencerie de Chablis. And at this time, it was the beginning of the story of Chablis. Chablis is beginning to be a famous village, and with the monks of Pontigny, at this time they have developed the knowledge of winemaking. So here I can be I can go outside because there is no network. But just after this very important oak door, you could see the church of Saint-Martin just after the oak door, just outside.
Yeah, you can see the steeple.
Yeah,
the tower top of the church.
We can do the round of all the building by the cellars at Domaine Laroche. We can do it here because we don't have enough network. Here, it's the name of the cellar is la cave how can I say? It's where we do the blend of Blanchot, la réserve de l'obédience. I can explain after how we work, but it's here. It's in this very important and imposant stone table that we do the final blend of Saint-Martin, of l'Obédiencerie.
Oh, great.
And so another cellar to finish.
No, I love to see all of the, aha. And there it is, the press.
It's a very old press. You can imagine that at this time, the monks pressed for many different producers. It's like a communal press, and it's here from the 13th century. So with this, after some pictures and video of l'Obédiencerie Chablis, it's easier to understand the place where we are and the roots of Domaine Laroche in Chablis.
No, it's fascinating to see that there's well over 1,000 years of history with where you're simply walking through. We were blown away not only by when we were all there last year as we went on our tour of France in May. It was actually this week we were there. Only a year ago. Things are. It's funny how things have changed much in a year. But with the history and with the winery itself, let's talk about when you joined the winery and a little bit of background for those that don't know you, how you ended up at Domaine Laroche.
So I started at Domaine Laroche in 11. I was born in Burgundy, and I studied enology in Burgundy. And my first works in winemaking were at this time in Burgundy. It was I learned with Nadine Gublin from Domaine Jacques Prière, and with Jean-Pierre de Smet of Domaine de l'Arlot in Nuit Saint-Georges. So after I left, I worked in Bordeaux and in the Rhone Valley. And after, for me, I think it's important to try to have a global vision of winemaking, of viticulture, of different knowledges and different empirism. And I think it's important to build himself. So what at this time I joined in 11 Domaine Laroche because a lot of changements in terms of philosophy was imputed, and I think it's important to understand the philosophy because we it's not a philosophy. It's not a certification. The philosophy is how we are, how we work in the vineyard, what we do in the cellar, years after years. It's not things that we do for one time and for only 1 year. So it's why at this time I joined Domaine Laroche. It was to create a new input with all the team at Laroche in the vineyard, but also in the cellar.
No, it's fascinating. Some of the changes that you've made, everything from really adopting that. Actually, tell us a little bit about the one man, one plot philosophy of what you do in the vineyard, because for an estate of your size, there's an individuality and a personality now with the wines that I didn't necessarily see in the past.
But we work in our vineyard as we have a small estate. It's almost 90 hectares. It's less than a big chateau in Bordeaux. That means it's not huge. Pontet-Canet is a huge chateau in Bordeaux, and they do a very beautiful job in the vineyard and in the cellar also. So our philosophy it was to try to create a new global environment in the vineyard, and one man one plot. It's very easy to understand the concept. You have only one worker for each plot. That means it's not a staff. There is no a huge staff with 10 or 15 people who work for all the vineyard. Is very important, because you can imagine that the worker, he or she, works as it is own vineyard plot. But for many years, that means he knows very well each plant. He knows very well all the characteristics, the problem of vigors, the good things. That means it's very important. And we are in contact with them, of course. And it's very easy to understand that it's like an integrated organism. We work together. And we work like this for all the plots. But we have also, that means each worker is dedicated to only the plant from the pruning to the harvest. It takes a lot of time, because we here at Laroche we prune in 2 times. So it's not usual. All guys did that before. It's when you prune in 2 times, you have like you can delay the starts of the growth. So it's many things that we can do, because we have one man one plot. But also we have a lot of people who, which is dedicated to all the mechanism to fight the weeds, and so, because we don't use any herbicides, and we have a lot of different practices.
So a question just came through from Vintage 64. What's the average size of the plot for one person, for that one man?
So it depends, but it could be 5 hectares. 5 hectares, but only from the pruning to the harvest. But you don't do alone the harvest.
Yeah.
But you don't have to drive a tractor. You don't have to go in the cellar. So dedicated and concentrated to the plant. It's maximum 5 hectares, but it's between 4 and 5.
That's good to know. I love that again, that concept of identity, of personality, that we know, the nuance of different plots, whether or not they're village or premier or grand cru, or even the plots within those. And that actually ties into the concept of Massal. So what is Massal to you, and how do you employ that in Domaine Laroche?
So Massal is the opposite of clone, genetical clone. That means there is no certification for a Massal selection. It's old and rustic genetical selection from our previous workers at Laroche. It's like a legacy. You can imagine at Domaine Laroche when you are going in Les Blanchots or in Les Fourchaumes, we have very old vines, and we have observed then that there is more resistances against disease. There is more resistances against the hydric stress, and there is more character of soils of terroir in the skins. That means it's very important for us for the future and for the philosophy that we try to spray in the wines. It's why we have started a huge plan of mosaic selection at Domaine Laroche. We started it in 2012 with 2 different plots in Les Blanchots and in Les Fourchaumes. And now we are able to plant new vineyard with zoos mosaic selection. That means it's our genetical legacy. It's the future. There is now we are at the limit of the clone. There is a lot of disease. There is a lot of wood disease in the vineyard. So and it's very important to develop this.
No, it's so there's not only this approach talking about the future, but you've made some changes with processes like the Stelvin enclosure, for example, which was something that Michel started back in the late 90s, early 2000s. And you decided to change that in 2013, 2014. What made you decide to make that change?
So to be honest, it was it was a technical decision. It was not also a marketing decision, and it was not also also to do a break with Michel Laroche or with previous staff, not at all. But it was an evolution of what we started in the vineyard. The works we do with the mosaic selection, the works we do in the cellar with the grapes, because you can imagine that our concept is to try to extract all the good coupons from the skins. It's during the press, we never press over 1 bar, but we try to extract all the natural antioxidants, the natural phenolics, all the minerals and all the coupons we don't know, but we can feel it. And then we try to keep it and release it in the final bottle. So it's a long process because after we have the decantation, we don't use any enzymes. And at least for the bottling, we use only a very soft filtration to try to keep all the so that our wines have a natural capacity to be protected with the natural coupons, and our wines are reductive. And our wines need oxygen. That means oxygen, it's not a problem. The quantity of could be a problem. The no control of oxygen at some point of the process is a problem. But at least in the bottle, our wines need to involve and need to have a respiration. And it doesn't work with screw cap. Screw cap is a good closure for classic Chablis, for wines that you don't expect to be keeping for many years. Bottles of wine you want to drink very early in the year. With a natural cork, you have an evolution, and the bottles you are going to drink in 5 years from now, it's not the same that the one you can drink now. And I think it's important because we have a new emotion. So
no,
the judgment comes from there.
I certainly agree. I mean, something that I've noticed, at least with the wines, having tasted, wines in the Premier and Grand Cru from Domaine Laroche from 2007, 2008
Yeah.
in screw cap. And then seeing it in the cork enclosure, I think that there's something different that's happening with the wines. I think that you're getting enough weight and power without a fear of premox or excessive oxidation in the wines. They actually age very well. I opened up a bottle of 2014 in cork. It was the Vaillant, and it was beautiful. It was expressive. It had all of the notes of Chablis Premier Cru, but it wasn't reductive. It wasn't overtly reductive, as I've seen some of the wines in the past.
But it says it's reduction is like the bitterness. There is good reduction and bad reduction. It's the same with bitterness, and we don't we use natural cork. We use a cylindric closure, but we don't. We have also reduced by more than 60% the concentration of total sulfates. That means there is not only one point of the process. It's a global philosophy, and since 2012, we started in the vineyard with more salt selection, with different other subject of research and development. And at La Roche also, we worked a lot with all the staff in the cellar to check and to reduce drastically the concentration of sulfates. I think it's very important because it's easy to have no problem with oxidation. If you use a lot of sulfates, you enzymes, you use a very drastic filtration, you add nitrogen and the screw cap. No problem. You don't want to have any problem of premox, but also you don't have any emotion in the bottle. Yeah. And I think we need to have it, and I think it's important. That means it's why we need to take care of this. That means the final customer need to have a perfect bottle on this table, but also you need to have a story, you need to have an emotion, you need to have a texture, and this texture, because I think a Chablis needs to have a texture. It's not only acidity, minerality to be over straight. You need to have the texture of the clay, of the limestone, and you can have this if you let a lot of life in the bottle.
We never got a chance to talk about the effects of Portlandian versus Kimmeridgian soils in Chablis. So, if you can, with the vineyards and the plots that you have, break down what you get from those two different eras of soil.
So, can you repeat, please, because the network was not very good.
So a Kimmeridgian versus Portlandian.
Yeah.
What do you get, organoleptically between the two in the wines from Domaine Laroche?
So we don't find the Portlandian and the Kimmeridgian in the same places. We find the Portlandian on the plates of Chablis. If you have a picture of the hill of Les Grands Crus, you have a beautiful soil and rock of Kimmeridgian, and the Kimmeridgian is very different if we compare Les Blanchots and Les Clos, but and at the top of the hill, if you are just over the trees, it's a plate of Portlandian. You can imagine that it's the wine which are produced on these soils are very pure, very straight. There is no texture of clay. it's very important when we test a Petit Chablis. For me, it's a perfect reading of the Portlandien. If you taste a Petit Chablis, it's the texture of Petit Chablis. It's a very straight, and the finish of the wine is always like a texture of chalk.
Okay.
Okay. With the Chiméridien, we always find Chiméridien with a blend of clay. And the clay in a wine is a texture. It's why if we compare Chablis and Petit Chablis, Petit Chablis is producing on Portlandien and Chablis and Chiméridien. With les Chablis, there is more concentration. The entrance in the palate is more smoothie. It's more full-bodied, and it's the texture of clay, and also of not at all the same microclimate, because you can imagine that then when you are on the plate, it's more windy, it's more cold, and so it's why the berries are more very pure.
Yeah, so we've got a backdrop here of the village of Chablis, of course with the crew behind. So talking about crews, what are some of your favorite crews to work with, and why?
Chablis is a very singular appellation because there is no only there is two banks. There is the right one all along and the hill of les Grands Crus, and also on the left bank. But I think there is many different Premier Cru in terms of characteristics. And if you compare at Laroche les Vaudevets and les Montmain, both are located on the left bank, but both are completely different. So I love les Montmain. I love les Montmain at Laroche because for me it's a perfect block. It's you are at the top of the hill. It's the blend between the clay and the limestone is beautiful. There is a very nice texture of soil. It's a very rustic vines also, and it produces grapes with very thick skins with a lot of materials inside.
Okay.
And I think it's a wine who needed to be open. It's a discreet one, but it needs time to coming. But I love Les Montmain because it's a very singular. I love it.
Yeah, I mean, there's a good mixture for Montmain as well as Vaillon, I think, with a little bit more of the rolling hills, where there's this denseness, but the wines can still be very light. There's still an expression of the soil and of the terroir.
That means it's the notion of terroir is complex. There is the soil, but also the notion of valley in Chablis is very important. The microclimate with the wind, with the exposure. Les Vaillons, it's a very specific block because it's very easy to ripe the fruits. It's less windy than Les Montmain, and the texture of clay is completely different. It's why in Les Vaillons the palate is more round, the fruits is more open, more like the wild fruits in the field. It's so different.
So there's a wine that we have in the market, the Viennois, which we got a chance to. I got a chance to visit that crew 2 years ago. So could you explain what the Viennois is in relation to some of the other plots on the left bank?
Yeah. So at La Roche we have 60 hectares in different places of the appellation, in the right bank, in the left bank, and we separate each of them for the winemaking and at least for the final blend of Saint-Martin. Viennois is located just under the Premier Cru, les Lys, and Premier Cru, les Épinottes. That means it could be included in the Premier Cru Les Vaillons. It's in the heart of Chablis. It's a few meters from here, and it's one of the oldest blocks in Chablis. We are lucky. We own 6.7 hectares, and each of because there is 6.7 hectares, and the plot is separated with many small one. We separate it for the winemaking, and we ferment and we age Viennois in a very big cask. It's more than 30 years old cask. That means no new at all, and it's 55 hectoliters. It's very good because that's it. Thank you, William. So it's exactly what we explained before with the cork. I think with the oak, we don't have any process or percentage, or it depends. But Viennois, it's 100%. That means we select one, and after this, we continue the aging on the fine lees, and we after this we rack the wines every year in in May or June, and after we finish the aging in one stainless steel tank. And the rest, you can see there is other cask, big cask. Yes. The name is Foudre. We blend in Saint-Martin. That means La Viennois is a very complex one. It's not it's not a Premier Cru, it's not a Grand Cru, but he has his own personality. And after this, the other food are directly blended in Saint-Martin. And I think it's important. Sorry, there is a lot of it's an honest circle with a lot of flowers and
you get yes,
yeah, pollen. And so it's very important because for a lot of people, Saint-Martin is a classic Chablis with only a stainless steel tank. And when you know La Viennois, after it's easier to understand Saint-Martin. It's definitely one of the rock of Saint-Martin. It's the soul of Saint-Martin, and definitely in the heart of Chablis. And so I love La Viennois.
It's a beautiful wine. I certainly enjoy it, and there's been some changes as well with the Bourgogne with 2018. Is that correct?
Yeah. We started in 14. Viennois, the first vintage was 14.
Oh yeah. So I know that with Viennois, but the Bourgogne Chardonnay. There was a change in 2018 as well. I didn't realize that Alban, our French brand manager, which is very exciting. So
because we have changed also the partnership with some growers. At the beginning, the main partnership was in Mâcon, very good places in Mâcon, in Burgy, on the plates of Ushisi, and now we have a lot of the major concentration of Bourgogne comes from all the area of Chablis. On the plate between Chablis and La Champagne.
Ah, so I actually have the 2018 right here.
Yeah.
And my first, of course, the first chance ever tasting it because it just arrived in the States. And yes, I mean there's a greater sense of minerality and tension in the Bourgogne Chardonnay with this vintage, even given that it was a very ripe vintage. I'm very excited about the Bourgogne Chardonnay.
So it's a Chardonnay done by a Chablis house. There is no oak, not at all, zero oak, and we we select the grapes, the berries al dente to keep the freshness, the acidity, and to be on the limestone and on the saltiness of the wine. And we ferment and we age on fine lees in a reductive way to keep all this texture of wine. That means it's not at all the Bourgogne we can see in Beaune or in Côte d'Or. Not at all.
No, I mean, you know,
it's a Chablis approach.
Exactly. I mean, it's very fresh. It's very focused. You know, I really like, again, to me, there's a greater sense of acidity and, you know, and minerality on the 2018 Bourgogne that I haven't necessarily seen with previous vintages. So it's a beautiful wine. It's really well done.
Thank you. So, you know, at Laroche, we are dedicated to Chardonnay. We produce only 5 levels of different appellations. We do Bourgogne, Petit Chablis, Chablis, Chablis Premier Cru, and Chablis Grand Cru. That's it. There is no red, there is no Sauvignon, there is no other wines. We are here and we spray our roots all over the village of Chablis.
You do one grape variety and that's it.
Yeah, that's it.
Keeps it simple. So you touched briefly on oak treatment and that you don't have a philosophy. And you know, there's a lot of producers in Chablis that are either we use oak or we don't use oak. Tell us a little bit about how you approach oak with the different plots and the different cru.
So to understand the global concept, I think to produce a great Chablis, a terroir wines, we need to have a respiration during the aging. A respiration, no oak. So that means we have to manage it. It's exactly when you cook, you need to have many things. And it's exactly how we work. So it depends of each block, because in les clos need always a lot of respiration. That means it's well work in oak. So we don't work with new oak, but it works well. If you compare with Vaudevey, you are on the freshness and on the acidity. Perhaps the tasting could be compared with the Riesling. So we don't try to use too much oak because the respiration could be over for the wine. That means it's a feeling management. But for sure, we don't use only 100% of stainless steel for whole or Chablis or Grand Cru.
Oh,
because
go ahead, please.
Because for us, we need to have to work with the texture, and if you work only with stainless steel, you don't have the emotion of texture, and it's exactly like for a red. You know, for a red, you have some tannins, and you need to have polymerization with the oxygen during the aging to have like more texture of velvet, to have like better tannins, less rough than on stainless steel. And if you do with exactly like the same with the white, it doesn't work. Because you work with only the reductive way, there is no oxygen, there is no polymerization of all the complex compounds in the wine. That's why the oxygen management on the oak management is very important. But what we do for all our wines, for Viennois, for all our Premier Cru, Grand Cru, we age during, it depends, it could be 6 or 9 or 11 months on the lease with no racking, and after this we finish all our aging in one stainless steel tank with a lease. That means after we use the stainless steel tanks as the last content before the bottling, and we will have a very low and slow decantation, natural decantation, to prepare the wine to the bottling. So that's, I think it's important. That means it's a long way. We need time, and it's important to produce vin terroir.
No, I really enjoy how, again, putting it back into stainless steel allows the wines to marry in many ways and to blend back. But on the lees, that way you can still control oxygenation in a natural way by the use of the lees. You talked about, there's not one plot, or, every plot is according to the philosophy of Domaine Laroche. So
Yes.
A good example of that is with the Réserve de la Vidance
Yeah.
compared to the Blanchot. So tell us the difference between the two wines, because they're both from the Blanchot Grand Cru, correct?
So we own almost 4.5 hectares in Les Blanchots. The total area of Les Blanchots represents 11.7 hectares, and we have 7 different blocks. We harvest all of them separately, because you can imagine there is very small differences between each of them, the age of the vines, the rootstock, the exposure. And after this, what we do, you have seen before the very old stone table in the cellar, and we put all the samples. It's a blind tasting. Not this one.
There we go.
This one. Yeah. And so what we do, so we put all the samples from all the block, and we draw on this table a virtual triangle. And each summit represents an excess. One is an excess of power in the nose. The other one is an excess of power in the mouth. And the last one is a power of acidity. And we sort each samples with these 3 summits. And after, we do the final blend of La Réserve de l'Obédience. It represents 3,000 bottles, with all the samples in the center of the triangle. That means La Réserve de l'Obédience is a creation, a human.
Oh, looks like we froze there for a minute.
Place together.
There
We
go.
have very famous sommelier, so it's very, it's like a communion, because it's very solennel, and you can imagine that La Réserve de l'Obédience is a perfect point of balance of Les Blanchots. It's a cuvée, but it's not a cuvée in terms of over winemaking. It's not more oaky. It's not more over concentrated. That means it's only different. And if you compare La Réserve d'Obédience and Les Blanchots just after the final blending, that means it's 6 months before the final blend, the final bottling. It's not so different. It needs time.
I see. It's because it is.
But it's
tasting
there
the
is-
reserve. It's a very pure expression of Blanchot and of the Grand Cru hill as a whole.
There is no
it's
excess.
much more elegant.
And Les Blanchots, before you mentioned le Chiméridien, Les Blanchots comes from white because it's the color of the limestone. It's a pure Chiméridien limestone. We can see inside many pieces of oysters fossils, and it's like a white marl. That means it's a white pasta. It's it gives to the wine like the perfect purity of Chablis. It's not the power of Les Clos. It's not the same expression of Les Clos. It's less phenolics and concentrated in phenolics than Les Clos. But it's for me, it's well concentrated in dry extracts and in minerals. There is like a spin column of limestone, and the finishing is always like the good bitterness of the chalk.
Yeah, and you can see the image here. This is of Blanchot on the southeastern side of the hill.
Yeah.
So you know, directly past that, you know, out of view, you'll see Les Clos, Valmeur, Vaudésir, for example.
Exactly.
So thank you so much for spending some time, you know, with us.
Thank you.
I do want to touch briefly on the Chablis Saint-Martin, because I think that it is one of the when I didn't realize the vineyard sourcing that went into Saint-Martin, and one of those is some of the young vines from Les Clos, correct?
So yeah, Saint-Martin is all what we can spray in the vineyard and in Laroche philosophy is in the bottle of Saint-Martin. There is no compromising to produce Saint-Martin. That means we select the best block of Chablis. As I explained, there is a part of old vines from La Vieille Voie also inside. But we use also young vines of Les Blanchots or of many Premier Cru. We work like this. That means all what we can do for Saint-Martin, we do it. And at least it's a final blend of 40 or 45 hectares. That's all.
No, it's to be a Chablis appellated wine. I was just amazed with the vineyard sources that went into that wine. It's very surprising. It's not, you know, it's not simply Chablis Village.
It's not a simple Chablis. It's not a basic Chablis. It's a classic Chablis, but with the concentration, the texture, and the emotion. And you know, it's a very good wine to be aging also. It's not a technologic wine. You can keep it in the cellar for 10 years. It works well. Like currently, you can open 2012. It works very well. So it's done as we can do a Premier Cru and Grand Cru with the same.
I wish that I had a bottle of 2012.
Yeah.
So, you know, with this in mind, is there anything, you know, closing thoughts, is there anything that is new that's happening at the winery that you want to tell everyone about? Or, you know, something, you know, exciting that you've discovered in the vineyards or the winery?
So, I don't like the word of created, but, you know, we work every day, every year to reduce our impact on the environment. We have a certification. The name is High Environmental Value. That means it's more a certification to valorize our philosophy, because we do a lot of things in the vineyard, in the landscape, and we have bottled last year. Le cuvée zéro. That means it's a cuvée without any insurance, without any sulfates inside, and it comes from the opposite part of La Vieille Voie. It comes from a block, only 1.2 hectares in the north of just at the upper part of Grand Cru Les Vaudésirs. It's not a Grand Cru, it's a Chablis, and just under the plate of Portlandien. And there is nothing. It's hand harvested, and we press with whole bunches, and after this, a simple and wild fermentation and nothing, just a soft filtration. And I think it's good because in the Chablis family at Laroche, we have a classic Chablis, we have Saint-Martin, we have La Vieille Voie, and now we have like Cuvée Zero. Very interesting because it's a new reading of the terroir, perhaps more wild, but I think it's easy to understand that when we taste La Vieillevoix, that Chablis is located very close to La Champagne. So that means a lot of spices. There is some nuts aromas, some bread aromas. So a very good wines to discover. So we produce only 3,000 bottles, but so it's just to crystallize our philosophy for the reducing of all the entrants in the wines. So it's like a prototype.
Well, Ken Fredericks, Ken Frederickson, he mentioned that he was there in December. So I'll have to ask Ken how the wine was showing and if he brought any back with him to the U.S. So you know, maybe we can find a couple of bottles here in the States very soon. Well, thank you so much, Gregory.
Thank you, William.
Really appreciate it. You know, I love the dive into Chablis and what you're doing. It's delicious.
Thank you.
It's natural wine to run for its money, right?
So, cheers to all. Take care and see you soon.
Au revoir, my friend. Chin, chin.
Bye-bye, William. Ciao.
Bye-bye.
Ciao.
Ciao.
Bye.
So if you don't follow Domaine Laroche, certainly follow them on Instagram and check out our next IG Live with Dal Forno on Friday morning with Alessandra Boga, our Italian wine specialist. All right, stay safe out there, and we'll see you soon.